All right, so good evening, everybody. Today is the 19th of January, 2026, and this is our first face-to-face class, although we have been in class for a week. And what I noticed, first of all, is that we have had a bunch of people who have already submitted the first writing assignment. And actually everybody has now, so that is fantastic. What we're doing is working toward a paper about an experience with risk analysis. And so as we go through the material, what we did, first of all, I gave you an example of my when I crashed an airplane situation, which is 1000% true, by the way. And what I hope is that you can take some experiences that you have had and bring that into class. So occasionally when people start writing these papers, and I haven't graded your introductions yet, but I will before the next section comes up. But basically what we're doing here is talking about how as human beings, we're not really very good at estimating risk. And because of that, in business, there's a lot of mathematical methods that use probability to identify risk and quantify it. Because I guess if I were to make a really sweeping generalization, and then also, please remember, I'm an engineer, not a sociologist or a psychologist, so take it for what it's worth. But it seems to me that a basic statement is that every single person has an individual risk tolerance that's sort of baked into our character or into our personalities. So when a risk occurs, some people are like, nope, ain't doing it. And other people are more willing, just jump in, and that's why, like with stock portfolios, investment portfolios, there are different risk tolerances that financial advisors will advise people to go into based on questions that they answer as to how risk averse they are. But the answer to it really is you can't avoid risk. You shouldn't avoid risk. You need to avoid danger. Okay, so there's two different things. And so this is the other part, is that danger and opportunity are sort of like bookends to this idea of risk. And you should always optimize chances for opportunity, minimize chances for danger. And then with risk, you have to evaluate the risk and over the course of doing business, deal with the risk as it actually exists. So risk, danger, opportunity are not the same thing. And that's one of the first basic ideas that we learn in this class. The other thing is, generally speaking, risk analysis is different by every profession. So different professions have different methods by which they evaluate risk. And then it's also quantified. And so we're kind of doing this in a more general sense because you can use something in your field of study to do risk analysis. However, you also may just want to think about it in general terms, which is why I love that textbook, Deep Survival. Deep Survival is like, when I read this many, many years ago, and my nephew, who is a grown man with a family now, had given me this textbook or this book and had me read it. And I just thought, what an amazing study in human nature, So I thought when I started teaching this class, I thought this is a really good way to launch into this idea of how do humans tolerate risk? How do we evaluate risk? And then what do we do with it? So there are some professions that are inherently very, very risky. For example, I think I have mentioned already, but I will mention throughout the semester that my background in engineering is in petroleum engineering. So I came out of an oil field background. And when you drill oil wells, there are huge amounts of risks involved depending on how developed an oil field is. But if you're going for a strictly new play, which sometimes called a wildcat, you may be really looking at risking literally tens of millions of dollars on a 1 or 2% chance rate of return. So you can see that that doesn't really make sense for anybody. And for that reason, the risk is generally spread around by having different people contribute part of the risk. But you also have to balance it out for yourself by proven fields that you already have and developing them, because the risk on those is much, much less. But every field has risks involved. But so what we need to do, first of all, in this class is to define what is meant by risk, and then to sort of just think about how you and I feel about risk, and sort of what your basic tendencies are. So I would say for myself, for example, when I crashed an airplane in 1988, my tolerance for risk was extreme. You know, I mean, I always felt like everything was going to turn out my way. And I don't know where that came from, because that has not been the case in most of my life. However, that was sort of my basic proclivity. And like most people, as I've gotten older, I've gotten much more risk averse. And I've also, I think, gotten more thoughtful in evaluating risk. But I think Deep Survival is an excellent guide for thinking about that. So, Duggar, since you are the only person here, tell me your thoughts about Deep Survival, or about risk in personal situations like that, or tell me anything about your feelings about risk that you're willing to share with the class.
Yeah, for sure. So I've only just begun starting to read the book. I saved the digital library version, and I'm not liking it because I have to be on a computer to read it. So I think I'm going to end up getting the Audible version because I like listening to things more. But yeah, I think risk, even in a sense of just anything, like with my job, there's risks in a lot of stuff that we do at higher education. When it comes to activities and stuff, there's risk of people getting injured. There's risk of nobody showing up. There's risks of, causing a ruckus and getting other departments involved. So I mean, the risk could be a slap, like the consequence could be a slap on the wrist, but also, it could be something even worse. And so it just depends on what you're doing and things like that. So I think this is going to be a very interesting class, and letting us be able to know and know that there will be risk, and how to manage that. I think is going to be
absolutely good. Yeah, and I think you're right. I think in your field, where you're dealing with students who are seeking new experiences, that can be a very meaningful, it's everything. I mean, it's everything, because you can't really have an experience without some degree of risk, but how do you manage that risk, right? I mean, right. This is an interesting example. But I just thought of that this had just happened in my life, but my husband and I were just on vacation, and we went snorkeling, which is generally speaking a pretty low risk endeavor. Right. But my husband was given a life jacket that actually did not inflate. And so that was, that's a risk that could have been mitigated. We'd never snorkeled before. So, and we were in a different country where safety is not really a thing. So we talk about that later too. We are very protected in the United States in a lot of different ways. But in this particular country, risk was just like, oh, here, just put this on and jump in the water. And that's definitely a risk situation where it's not really a danger. I mean, there is danger involved, but it's not a danger like exploding Pinto danger stuff. It's like which I'm referring to a car, which we'll read the case study on that later on. But it's like something that, you know, you want to do, and in order to have this experience, you have to have a risk associated with it. So the benefit and the opportunity is getting to experience seeing underwater life and structures. But the risk is, does your equipment work properly? And you can mitigate that risk, and we could have mitigated that risk by working more closely with the people who were in charge of safety, but it didn't seem to be too much of a concern. So that's kind of an example, isn't it? I mean, that kind of thing happens in student life a lot, I would think,
Right.
where, yeah, so you're gonna go snorkeling, you should make sure all the equipment is working before you get on board, I guess. That would be my
That's
risk
fair.
analysis. And if it's not, throw it away, man. You know, you don't need to deal with that. So there you go.
In the
So
grand scheme of things, they're not that expensive to replace. So
they are not. That's it. And that's exactly right. So this is a good thing. So it's good to think about that. But I mean, if you were very risk averse, you could say, well, I'm just never going to go snorkeling because this thing might happen. You know, that's a terrible way to live your life too, right? I mean, to have an
Yeah.
experience, you have to get out and you have to live in the world. So then you decide if it's worth the risk. And I would say even at this point, my husband and I discussed it, and you know, everything turned out fine. Nobody was injured. We got to snorkel, we got to see some good stuff. But we did decide that next time we're going to take a little bit more, especially if we're in a third world country, we're going to make sure ourselves that the equipment works before we take somebody else's word for it. So there you go. That's a risk analysis right there. So hadn't even thought about it till just now. So there you go.
Yeah.
There you go. So, this week, what we're doing is, if you look at all of the sections, and you can see on my page, I have the next section ready to go, but I have not opened it up to you guys yet because I want to make sure I've got everything done from last week and this week first. And the reason for that is our ultimate goal in this class is to write a paper. And the paper can either be about a personal experience, like I could write about my airplane experience, or it can be about something in your field. For example, a few years ago, I had a young woman who was working in finance write a beautiful paper about blockchain, or about cryptocurrency. And she did not buy cryptocurrency, but she weighed the risks of crypto and what it really was, and gave me and helped me a lot too, which is also one of the things I love about being a teacher, is how much I learn from my students. So from this woman, I learned a lot about what crypto is and what crypto is not. So that was a really good experience for me. And she did a beautiful analysis about, these are the upsides, these are the opportunities, you know, these are the upsides to the risk, these are the downsides to the risk. This is what can happen on the good and the bad, and she gave a conclusion, a thesis based on her study. But that's what we're aiming for at the end of this class. So hopefully the introduction or the experience that you wrote about may turn into a paper. So you may have already written a section of your paper.
Okay.
But if not, we want to find that out before very long, which is why I'm not opening up the sections ahead of time, because I don't want you to tear off on something that's not defined. And even if you do have a good topic, here's just a point. Most students write, and you probably know this because you've been writing for a while, but most students write too big. They take on something huge, you know? And the more you can focus your topic, and also to focus it as a risk analysis, which we're going to work on, the better your topic will be. So when we get to next week and the week after, that's what we're going to do. We're going to make sure that you have a good topic, a good research question, and that it's focused enough that you can write about it in this class. So then aside from that, we're going to write it in APA format, and we're going to have a nice finished product and something that you can be really proud of at the end of the class. But hopefully everything will work together toward that end. So far, because I've, you know, kind of tightened that up and bottlenecked it for you so that you and I have to have interaction before you go to the final before you go to an extended process on your topic, that's how it's gonna happen. But we'll probably have to fine tune a little bit, just not based on your work so far, but just based on my experience in this class. We'll probably want to focus it a little bit as we go on. Anyway, having said that, as we look at our work, everybody, like I said, has submitted their first writing assignment, and everybody has responded to the forums. So right now, everybody has a 100%. So yay, let's keep it that way, right? That would be good. That's it. So for this week, we talk about, we're gonna read some more deep survival. We're gonna write another section of the paper, and we're just talking about navigating the Moodle class. But here, the reading assignments are posted here, and then we're gonna do another discussion forum, and we're gonna take a quiz. So basically, the way we navigate this page is just to look at the week, and then to look at everything underneath it. So the lectures are going to help you. Some of these are lectures from past classes, but they can be helpful because we're doing the same type of material that we've done in the past. So you may want to watch those, and just to get more information, then you'll do the reading assignments for deep survival, do a discussion forum, and then you take a quiz. So you choose 3 questions from this discussion guide, and then you write it as a nice, in a nice format. You know, just this isn't like a particular style of format, but just something that's nice and legible and looks professional, and then you'll submit it here. So one thing that my students have told me in the past is that you always look for the word submit, because that means there's an assignment. Okay, and so anytime it says submit for success is the little thing that my student told me. So that's what you will be doing. And so this week you'll just read some more in deep survival, and then by this coming Sunday, take the quiz, and then respond to the forum, and then respond to some of your classmates as well. So I will keep up on my grading, no matter what happens. I will sit down and get everything graded, so that we're never a week behind. So I'll get your stuff graded from last week before your assignments are due for this week. And so that we'll always know how you're doing. And if you need to correct course, we can do it. But if you don't need to correct course, even better. So we'll just see how everything rolls out, and we'll keep doing it, but everything's structured so that you can succeed. And I do want to let you know, I've taught this class, I believe this is the 4th year I've taught it. And I have never had anybody get a D or an F. So I expect everybody here will get an A or a B if they listen, if they do the work and listen to and help work with me to make sure that everything's tuned in when we get to the writing stages, or the final choosing of a topic and narrowing things down. Everything will be spelled out for you, and you should be successful with a good grade. So
you're saying there's a chance.
That's right. You still got a chance, Duggar. You still got a chance. So you could be the first to do.
I don't want to be. I don't want to be that statistic. I'll tell you that.
That's right. That's right. We want to keep it on the upside here. So let's keep all my data skewed to the positive. So perfect. Everybody with A's or B's. So do you have any questions for me tonight?
I don't think so. No, I think.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. So the other thing I wanted to tell you is this book, Deep Survival. If you choose to just get this book, if you don't want to read it on your computer, just come over to Math and Science Building, inside of room 115. There are 2 copies of this sitting outside of my office. So going to 115, my office is 117. There's a table out there, 2 copies of the book. You're welcome to borrow one if you would like to do that. And then if you have any questions, you or your classmates out in Cyberland, do not ever hesitate to get a hold of me, because that's what I'm here for. So if you have any questions, come by or send me an email or send me a text or schedule a Calendly appointment with me, and we will get you squared away.
All righty.
All right. So you're home by 6. How's that sound?
That's pretty great. That actually works.
All right.
Great, so.
All right. Good deal. All right. No rest for the wicked, right?
Amen. Amen.
Well, listen, you guys have a good night, and I will look forward to working with you this week, and we'll see you next Monday.
Awesome. Thanks, Astrid.
Okay. Bye, Duggar.
All right. Bye.